as we begin our journey in learning calculus, we're going to have our first unit deal with limits and continuity. And specifically, we're going to start with limits, because limits are going to allow us to learn about the derivative. It's going to allow us to learn about the integral, and those are the two big parts of calculus in general. So, what's a limit? Well, I'm going to answer that question by talking about a quick little function. Let's take a nice basic function that everybody knows. F of x is equal to x squared. Okay. If I gave you the function f of x is equal to x squared, and I asked you for the value of f of 4, all right, what would you say is the value of f of 4? Yeah, it's equal to 16. 4 gets plugged into the x value, and we end up with 4 squared, which is the same thing as 16. All right, piece of cake. Great way to start our class. All right, let's change the function a little bit. Let's make it a rational function. So I got a new function, g of x. Right? And g of x is going to be x over x squared plus 3x. Okay. All right, so a little bit more complex function. And this time, instead of the value of the function at 4, what's the value of the function when x is equal to 0? Okay. Well, what happens when we plug 0 in for x? Yeah, what happens is we end up having 0 in the denominator. We get 0 in the numerator as well, but we have this 0 in the denominator. 0 plus 3 times 0. So g of 0 is undefined. I'm just going to write UND for short there. G of 0 is undefined. Okay. We cannot plug in 0 because that would mean we would have to divide by 0. We can't do that. Okay. So that's where a limit comes into play. Right? A limit allows us to explore what's happening with the function as x gets really, really close to a particular value. Okay? We can plug in basically any other value besides 0 and negative 3, it looks like. If we plug in 0 and negative 3, we're going to divide by 0. But if we plug in any other value, we'll get some kind of output. Okay? So if we were to plug in 1, no big deal. If we were to plug in negative 1, no big deal. We could get values, right? G of 1, if we plug in 1 for x, it looks like we'd have 1 over 1 plus 3, or a quarter. That's fine, right? But what's happening to our function as we get closer and closer to 0? Because, yeah, g of 1 is good, g of a half is good, g of a quarter is good, g of a tenth is good, g of a thousandth is good, all right? But g of 0 is not good. But what's happening to the function as we get closer and closer, as x gets closer and closer to 0? Well, that's where the limit comes into play. That's how we're going to start our first part of the course.